Claire tightened her grip on the small knife in her hand as she moved cautiously through the dense forest. The air was thick with humidity, and every step she took seemed to stir up clouds of tiny insects that buzzed angrily around her face. She swatted at them absent-mindedly, her focus fixed on the ground ahead. Her boots crunched softly against the dry leaves and twigs scattered across the uneven terrain. It had been weeks since the crash, and survival had become her only priority. The memory of that day still haunted her, the violent shaking of the spacecraft, the deafening alarms blaring in her ears, and then the sudden silence after impact. She had woken up alone, surrounded by smoke and debris. Her crewmates were gone, either dead or missing. At first, she had tried calling for help over the comm system, but there was nothing, just static. Days turned into weeks, and Claire realized no one was coming for her. She was completely alone. Her stomach growled loudly, reminding her that food was running low. She had scavenged what she could from the wreckage, but most of it was spoiled or unusable. Now, she relied on whatever edible plants and small animals she could find in the wilderness. Today, though, luck didn't seem to be on her side. Hours of searching had yielded almost nothing except a few shriveled berries that might or might not be safe to eat. Hunger gnawed at her insides, making her feel weak and lightheaded as she pushed forward. Claire noticed something unusual ahead. A faint glimmer of metal peeked out from beneath a tangle of vines. Her heart skipped a beat. Could it be another piece of the ship? Maybe supplies she hadn't found yet? She quickened her pace, ignoring the pain in her legs from hours of walking. When she reached the spot, however, she froze. It wasn't part of her spacecraft. It was an entirely different vehicle. Sleek and silver, it looked like some kind of transport shuttle. Half buried in the undergrowth, Claire crouched behind a tree, her mind racing. Who did this belong to? Was someone nearby? For all she knew, it could be dangerous aliens who wouldn't hesitate to harm her. But if it belonged to humans, hope flickered inside her chest. She couldn't ignore the possibility. Taking a deep breath, she stepped out from her hiding place and called out hesitantly, "Hello? Is anyone there?" There was no response, just the sound of rustling leaves in the breeze. Claire glanced around nervously before inching closer to the craft. Up close, she could see that it was damaged. One of its landing struts was bent, and parts of the hull were scorched. Whoever owned it clearly hadn't planned to stay long. As she circled the shuttle, she spotted footprints leading away from it, heading deeper into the forest. They looked human-sized. Encouraged, she decided to follow them. The trail led her to a clearing where she finally saw him, a man sitting by a makeshift campfire, poking at the flames with a stick. He wore rugged clothing covered in dirt and grease, and his dark hair was messy and unkempt. Claire hesitated, unsure whether to approach or retreat. Before she could decide, the man looked up and noticed her standing there. His eyes widened in surprise. "Who are you?" he asked sharply, jumping to his feet. In one swift motion, he pulled out a small weapon and pointed it at her. Claire raised her hands instinctively, dropping the knife she'd been carrying. "Wait, I'm not here to hurt you," she said quickly. I saw your ship and thought maybe you could help me." The man studied her carefully, his expression guarded. After a moment, he lowered the weapon slightly, but kept it ready. "Help you how?" he asked. "My name is Claire," she began, trying to keep her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "I was part of a research team exploring this planet when our ship crashed. Everyone else is gone. I've been surviving on my own ever since." The man frowned, glancing at her worn-out clothes and gaunt appearance. "You're saying you're stranded here? Alone?" "Yes," Claire replied, feeling a lump forming her throat. "I don't even know if anyone knows we're missing. Please, if you have any way to contact others or take me with you, I'll do anything to leave this place." For a long moment, the man said nothing, simply staring at her. Then he sighed and holstered his weapon. "Name's Ryan," he said gruffly. "And yeah, I can see you're telling the truth. You look like you've been through hell. Relief washed over Claire, though she remained cautious. Thank you, she whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. I didn't think I'd ever meet another human again. Ryan gestured for her to sit down near the fire. Don't get too excited yet, he warned. My ship's not exactly in great shape. I landed here to trade with the locals, not pick up passengers. Getting off this rock isn't going to be easy. Claire nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. Still, even the smallest chance of escape felt like a lifeline. She sat down across from Ryan, warming her hands over the fire. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to relax, if only for a moment. So, Ryan said after a while, breaking the silence, what made you decide to wander into the middle of nowhere? Pretty risky move for someone in your position. I saw your ship, Claire admitted. I figured it was worth the risk. I didn't know if it belonged to humans, but I had to try. I couldn't keep going like this, not without hope. Ryan nodded thoughtfully, his gaze drifting toward the trees. Hope's a funny thing, he muttered. Keeps people alive longer than they should sometimes. They talked more as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the clearing in shadow. Ryan explained that he was a trader, traveling between planets to exchange goods with alien species. He rarely interacted with other humans, preferring the solitude of space. Claire, in turn, shared fragments of her story, how she'd always dreamed of exploring the stars, only to end up fighting for survival on a hostile world. Despite their vastly different backgrounds, they found common ground in their shared loneliness. Ryan listened intently as Claire described the crushing isolation of being the sole survivor of her crew. She spoke of sleepless nights filled with nightmares and days spent battling despair. By the time she finished, the fire had burned down to embers, and the temperature had dropped significantly. You've been through a lot, Ryan said quietly. But listen, if I can fix my ship, I'll take you with me. No promises, though. This planet's rough, and these aliens aren't exactly friendly. Claire smiled faintly, grateful for even the slimmest chance. Thank you, she said again. That means more than you know. Ryan shrugged, leaning back against the log. Don't thank me yet. We've got a long way to go before either of us gets off this rock. With that, they settled into an uneasy silence, each lost in their thoughts. The night stretched on, filled with the distant sounds of wildlife and the crackling of the dying fire. For the first time in what felt like forever, Claire didn't feel quite so alone. The next morning, Claire woke up to the sound of Ryan moving around the camp. She opened her eyes gradually, taking a moment to remember where she was. The events of the previous day came rushing back, the discovery of Ryan's ship, their uneasy introduction, and the fragile alliance they had formed. Sitting up, she stretched her stiff muscles and looked around. Ryan was already busy packing supplies into a large sack, his movements quick and efficient. Morning, he said without looking at her. Sleep okay? As well as I could, Claire replied, brushing dirt off her clothes. She didn't mention the restless dreams that had plagued her during the night. Instead, she asked, what's the plan for today? Ryan paused and glanced at her. We need to head into the village. There's a group of aliens who trade with travelers like me. If we're lucky, they'll have parts I can use to fix my ship, or at least something valuable enough to trade for them. Claire nodded, though a flicker of unease passed through her. She had seen glimpses of the alien species on this planet. The four tall, insect-like creatures with sharp features and glowing eyes. They hadn't seemed aggressive, but their presence was intimidating all the same. Still, she knew she didn't have much choice. Staying behind wasn't an option if she wanted to leave this place. Do you think they'll help us? She asked cautiously. They might, Ryan said, slinging the sack over his shoulder. But it depends on what we offer in return. These guys don't do favors. They only care about profit. As they set off toward the village, Claire couldn't shake the feeling of vulnerability. She stuck close to Ryan, scanning the surroundings nervously. The forest felt alive with sounds, rustling leaves, chirping insects, and distant calls from unseen creatures. Every noise made her jump, but Ryan seemed unfazed, striding confidently ahead. After about an hour of walking, they reached the edge of the village. It was unlike anything Claire had ever seen. Strange structures made of twisted metal and organic material rose out of the ground, pulsating faintly as if alive. The air smelled metallic, and the ground beneath their feet felt soft, almost spongy. Alien figures moved among the buildings, their long limbs clicking softly as they worked. Ryan stopped and turned to Claire. "Stay close," he instructed, "and let me do the talking. If they ask, just nod or shake your head. Don't say anything unless I tell you to." Claire swallowed hard but nodded. She followed Ryan as he approached one of the larger structures, where several aliens were gathered. They turned to look at him, their glowing eyes narrowing slightly. One of them stepped forward, its mandibles clicking together in a rhythmic pattern. Ryan raised his hand slowly, showing he meant no harm. "I'm here to trade," he said in a calm, steady voice. Claire realized he must have learned their language during previous visits. She watched in awe as he pulled items from his sack, a shiny piece of machinery, some brightly colored crystals, and a small container filled with liquid. The alien examined each item carefully, its expression unreadable. Finally, it gestured toward Ryan and spoke in a series of clicks and hums. Ryan responded, pointing to Claire briefly before returning his attention to the negotiation. Claire tried to stay focused, but her mind wandered. What would happen if the trade failed? Would Ryan abandon her here? She pushed the thought away, reminding herself that panicking wouldn't help. After what felt like an eternity, the alien nodded and motioned for them to follow. It led them to a smaller building nearby where various tools and spare parts were displayed. Ryan inspected them closely, occasionally picking something up and examining it under the dim light. Claire hovered nearby, trying not to draw attention to herself. Eventually, Ryan selected a few items and handed them over to the alien. In return, he received a box containing what looked like engine components. He grinned triumphantly as they left the building, clearly satisfied with the exchange. "That should do it," he said as they walked back toward the forest. "With these parts, I can patch up the ship enough to get us off this planet." Claire felt a surge of relief, but also a pang of guilt. "What did you trade for those parts?" she asked hesitantly. "Some tech I scavenged from another trip," Ryan replied casually. "Nothing important." "But isn't that risky?" Claire pressed. "If you run out of things to trade." Ryan shrugged. "It's part of the job. You learn to adapt." They continued walking in silence for a while, the weight of their situation settling over them. As they neared the clearing where Ryan's ship was hidden, Claire finally spoke up. "Why are you helping me, Ryan? You barely know me." He stopped and looked at her, his expression thoughtful. "Maybe because you remind me of myself once," he admitted. "Lost, scared, trying to survive. I couldn't just leave you there." Claire felt a lump form in her throat. "Thank you," she whispered. "I won't forget this." Ryan gave her a small smile. "Don't thank me yet. We still have to make it out of here alive." When they arrived back at the ship, Ryan immediately got to work. He spread out the tools and parts on the ground, muttering to himself as he examined the damage. Claire offered to help, but he shook his head. "You'd probably just get in the way," he said bluntly. "Why don't you gather some firewood instead? We'll need it tonight." Though slightly hurt by his dismissal, Claire obeyed. She wandered into the woods, collecting branches and twigs until her arms were full. When she returned, she found Ryan deep in concentration, his hands moving quickly as he repaired the ship's systems. She sat down nearby, watching him work. As the hours passed, the two of them fell into a rhythm. Ryan focused on fixing the ship, while Claire took care of practical tasks like gathering food and keeping the fire going. Occasionally, they exchanged a few words, sharing stories about their lives before ending up on this planet. Ryan spoke about his travels across the galaxy, describing strange worlds and bizarre encounters. Claire listened intently, fascinated by his tales of adventure. Despite the progress they were making, tension lingered between them. Claire couldn't shake the fear that something might go wrong, that Ryan would change his mind, or that the ship wouldn't hold up during takeoff. But for now, she forced herself to focus on the present. Each passing day brought them closer to freedom, and she clung to that hope with everything she had thought by the time night fell. Ryan had managed to replace several key components. Exhausted, he leaned back against the ship and sighed. "We're getting there," he said. "Another day or two, and we should be ready." Claire smiled weakly, though her stomach churned with anxiety. "That's good news," she said softly. Ryan studied her for a moment, sensing her unease. "Hey, we'll make it," he assured her. "Just hang in there a little longer." She nodded, grateful for his reassurance. As they settled down for the night, Claire stared up at the stars, wondering what the future held. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to imagine life beyond this planet. A life where she wasn't constantly fighting to survive. It was a fragile dream, but it kept her going. And for now, that was enough. The next morning, Claire woke up to the sound of Ryan swearing under his breath. She opened her eyes and sat up quickly, rubbing the sleep from her face. Ryan was crouched beside the ship, frowning as he examined one of the newly installed parts. His hands were smeared with grease, and his expression was tense. "What's wrong?" Claire asked, her voice tinged with worry. "This piece I traded for isn't working right," Ryan muttered, tapping the component with a wrench. "It's supposed to stabilize the engine, but it's causing more problems than it solves." Claire felt her stomach drop. "Does that mean we can't leave yet?" Ryan sighed heavily and leaned back on his heels. "Not until I figure out how to fix it. If I don't get this sorted, the ship won't even make it off the ground." Claire bit her lip, trying to hide her growing panic. Every delay felt like another step backward, another chance for something to go wrong. She glanced at the forest surrounding them, half expecting to see alien figures emerging from the trees. The thought sent a shiver down her spine. "Is there anything I can do to help?" she asked after a moment. Ryan shook his head. "Not unless you know how to rewire an ion converter," he said dryly. Then, seeing the disappointment on her face, he added, "But you could keep an eye out for any more spare parts in the wreckage. Maybe there's something useful left." Claire nodded and grabbed a small bag before heading back toward the crash site. As she walked, her mind raced with questions. What if Ryan couldn't fix the ship? What if they ran out of time? The longer they stayed here, the more dangerous it became. She pushed the thoughts aside, focusing instead on searching through the debris. Hours passed, and Claire returned empty-handed. The wreckage had been picked clean long ago, leaving little behind except twisted metal and shattered glass. When she got back to the clearing, Ryan was still hunched over the ship, muttering to himself as he worked. He barely looked up when she approached. "I couldn't find anything," Claire admitted, setting the bag down. "What about you? Any luck?" "A little," Ryan replied, though his tone didn't sound hopeful. "I managed to rig a temporary fix, but it's not ideal. We'll have to be careful when we take off. If anything goes wrong mid-flight, we're done for." Claire swallowed hard, forcing herself to stay calm. "How long will it take to finish the repairs?" "A day or two, maybe," Ryan said, "if nothing else breaks." His words did little to reassure her. That night, as they sat by the fire, Claire found it impossible to relax. She stared into the flames, her thoughts consumed by worst-case scenarios. What if Ryan decided it was too risky to bring her along? What if he left without her? The idea filled her with dread. Finally, unable to hold back any longer, she blurted out, "What happens if you can't fix the ship in time? Will you still take me with you?" Ryan looked at her sharply, surprised by the question. "Of course I will," he said firmly. "I told you, I'm not leaving you here." "But what if it's too dangerous?" Claire pressed, her voice trembling. What if the ship fails completely? You could die because of me. Ryan hesitated, then sighed. Look, I've been in tough spots before. This isn't my first rodeo. Trust me, I'll get us out of here. Claire wanted to believe him, but doubt gnawed at her insides. She stared at the ground, tears welling up in her eyes. I can't stay here anymore, she whispered. I can't keep living like this. I'm so tired of being alone. Ryan watched her silently, his expression softening. After a moment, he reached out and placed a hand on her shoulder. You're not alone anymore, he said gently. We'll figure this out together. His words brought a flicker of comfort, but it wasn't enough to ease her fears. That night, Claire lay awake staring at the stars, her mind racing. She couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out, that every second they spent on this planet put them in greater danger. By the time morning came, she had made a decision. When Ryan woke up, he found Claire sitting cross-legged near the fire, her face pale but determined. I need to ask you something, she said quietly. Ryan frowned, sensing the seriousness in her tone. What is it? Claire took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly. If I marry you, will you promise to take me with you? No matter what happens. Ryan blinked, caught off guard. Marry you? He repeated, his voice incredulous. Claire, what are you talking about? I'm serious, she insisted, her voice rising slightly. I know it sounds crazy, but hear me out. If we're married, then you'd have to take responsibility for me. You wouldn't be able to leave me behind, no matter how bad things get. Ryan stared at her, unsure whether to laugh or feel sorry for her. Claire, marriage isn't some kind of insurance policy. It doesn't work like that. I know, she said quickly, but it's the only way I can think of to make sure you don't abandon me. Please, Ryan, just say yes. For a long moment, Ryan didn't respond. He studied her face, seeing the desperation in her eyes. Finally, he sighed and shook his head. Claire, listen to me. I'm not going to leave you here. You don't need to beg me or trick me into taking you with me. I already promised I'd help you. But promises can be broken, Claire argued, her voice cracking. This would be real. It would mean something. Ryan ran a hand through his hair, clearly conflicted. On one hand, he understood where she was coming from, her fear, her loneliness, but on the other hand, the idea of marrying someone out of obligation felt wrong. Still, he couldn't deny the pain in her voice or the desperation in her plea. Okay, he said finally. If it means that much to you, fine. But let's be clear, this isn't about love or commitment. It's just a formality, a way to give you peace of mind. Once we're safe, we can undo it if you want. Claire nodded eagerly, relief washing over her. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you so much. Ryan gave her a small, awkward smile. Don't thank me yet. We still have to survive long enough to actually do this. With that, they turned their attention back to the task at hand. Ryan resumed working on the ship, while Claire busied herself gathering supplies and keeping watch. Despite the gravity of their situation, Claire felt lighter somehow, as if the weight of uncertainty had been lifted from her shoulders. For the first time since arriving on this planet, she allowed herself to believe that she might actually escape Dot as the day wore on. However, Claire began to notice subtle changes in Ryan's behavior. He seemed quieter than usual, his movements slower and more deliberate. At first, she assumed it was just fatigue from working on the ship, but as evening fell, she realized something was wrong. Are you okay? She asked cautiously, watching him rub his temples. Yeah, I'm fine, Ryan replied, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. Just a headache. Claire frowned, concerned. Do you need water or food? No, I'm good, he said dismissively. Let's just focus on getting the ship ready. Though uneasy, Claire respected his wishes and didn't press further. As darkness settled over the clearing, they sat by the fire in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Claire couldn't. shake the feeling that something was about to change, that their fragile alliance was teetering on the edge of collapse. Little did she know, her instincts were right. The next few days would test them in ways neither of them could have anticipated. The next morning, Claire woke up to find Ryan already hard at work on the ship. He was crouched near the engine, his face tense and focused as he adjusted one of the components. The faint glow of dawn illuminated the clearing, casting long shadows across the ground. Claire sat up slowly, rubbing her eyes, and noticed that Ryan looked even more exhausted than the day before. His movements were slower, almost mechanical, and there was a sheen of sweat on his forehead, despite the cool morning air. "You look tired," Claire said softly, standing up and walking over to him. "Did you sleep at all last night?" Ryan glanced at her briefly but didn't stop working. "Not much," he admitted. "I had to finish tweaking the stabilizer. If it's not perfect, we'll never make it off this planet." Claire hesitated, unsure whether to push him further or let it go. Instead, she knelt beside him and handed him a bottle of water. "Here, you should drink something." "Thanks," Ryan muttered, taking a quick sip before setting the bottle aside. He wiped his hands on his pants and leaned back for a moment, closing his eyes. "We're close, though. Just a few more adjustments, and we'll be ready to test the engine." Claire nodded, trying to mask her anxiety. She wanted to believe him, but the tension in his voice made her uneasy. "What can I do to help?" she asked. Ryan shook his head. "Nothing right now. Just stay alert. If anything happens, anything unusual, you tell me immediately." Claire frowned but didn't argue. She moved away from the ship and perched on a nearby log, watching Ryan work. Her mind raced with questions. Was the ship really going to work? What if something went wrong during takeoff? And what about their agreement to promise of marriage? It felt strange to think about, especially now when survival seemed so uncertain. Hours passed, and the sun climbed higher in the sky. By midday, Ryan finally stood up and stretched, wiping his greasy hands on a rag. "All right," he said, his voice steady but tinged with exhaustion. "Let's test the engine." Claire's heart skipped a beat. "Are you sure it's ready?" "It has to be," Ryan replied, his tone firm. "We can't wait any longer. The aliens are getting restless. I've seen more of them around the edges of the forest lately. They know we're here, and they won't stay friendly forever." Claire shivered at the thought. She had noticed the same thing, the distant clicks and hums of the alien language growing louder, closer. It was as if they were being watched, their every move scrutinized. She pushed the fear aside and followed Ryan to the ship. He climbed inside and started flipping switches, his hands moving quickly over the controls. Claire stood outside, gripping the edge of the hatch tightly as the ship's systems powered up. A low hum filled the air, growing louder until it became almost deafening. Then suddenly, the sound faltered, sputtering in the silence. Ryan cursed under his breath and slammed his fist against the dashboard. Damn it, something's still wrong. Claire stepped closer, her pulse racing. "What is it?" "I don't know yet," Ryan snapped, frustration evident in his voice. He climbed out of the cockpit and began inspecting the engine again. Claire hovered nearby, feeling helpless as he worked. After several minutes of tense silence, Ryan finally spoke. "It's the fuel line. There's a blockage somewhere. If I don't fix it, the engine will overheat as soon as we try to take off." Claire's stomach churned. "How long will it take to fix?" "A few hours, maybe less," Ryan said, though his expression suggested otherwise. "But I need tools I don't have." "We'll have to go back to the village and trade for them." Claire froze. "Back to the village? Are you sure that's safe?" "The aliens." "I know," Ryan interrupted, his voice sharp. "But we don't have a choice. Without those tools, we're stuck here." Reluctantly, Claire agreed. They packed what little supplies they had left and set off toward the alien settlement. The journey was tense, each step weighed down by the knowledge that they were venturing into dangerous territory. As they approached the village, Claire clung to Ryan's side, her eyes darting nervously at every movement in the shadows. When they reached the trading area, Ryan wasted no time. He approached one of the aliens and began speaking in its clicking language, gesturing toward his sack of goods. The alien responded with a series of rapid-fire noises, pointing to a nearby structure where tools were displayed. Claire stayed close, her body rigid with fear as the negotiation dragged on. Finally, Ryan turned to her, holding up a small toolkit. "Got it," he said quietly. "Let's get out of here." They hurried back through the forest, their pace quick and urgent. Neither of them spoke until they reached the clearing where the ship was hidden. Ryan immediately got to work, using the new tools to disassemble part of the engine. Claire watched anxiously, her hands clenched into fists as she waited for news dot by sunset. Ryan emerged from beneath the ship, his face streaked with dirt and oil. "It's done," he announced, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "We can leave tomorrow morning." Claire exhaled sharply, relief flooding through her. "Thank God." Ryan nodded, collapsing onto the ground beside her. "Yeah, thank God." They sat in silence for a while, the weight of their ordeal settling over them like a thick fog. Finally, Claire spoke. About the marriage. Do you still agree to it?" Ryan sighed deeply, running a hand over his face. "Claire, I told you I'm not leaving you here. Whether we do this or not, you're coming with me." "But it would mean something," Claire insisted, her voice soft but resolute. "To me, at least. Please, Ryan, let's do it." Ryan studied her for a long moment, seeing the determination in her eyes. Finally, he nodded. "All right. Tomorrow. Before we leave, we'll do it. But remember, it's just a formality. Don't read too much into it." Claire smiled faintly, tears welling up in her eyes. "Thank you." That night, they slept fitfully, the anticipation of departure keeping them awake. When morning came, Ryan performed a final check on the ship, while Claire gathered their remaining supplies. Once everything was ready, they stood facing each other near the fire. "So, how do we do this?" Claire asked nervously. Ryan shrugged. "Simple enough. No priest, no ceremony, just words. Say after me, 'I, Claire, take you, Ryan, as my husband.'" Claire repeated the phrase, her voice trembling slightly. Then Ryan mirrored the statement, his tone calm but sincere. "When?" They finished. Claire felt a strange mix of emotions: relief, gratitude, and a lingering sadness that this moment wasn't rooted in love. "All right," Ryan said, breaking the silence. "Now let's get out of here." They boarded the ship together, strapping themselves into the seats as Ryan powered up the engines. The hum grew louder, vibrating through the hull. Claire gripped the armrest tightly, her heart pounding as the ship lifted off the ground. For a moment, everything seemed fine, but then, without warning, alarms blared, and the ship lurched violently. "What's happening?" Claire shouted, panic rising in her chest. "The stabilizer's failing." Ryan yelled back, his hands flying over the controls. "Hold on." The ship rocked wildly, throwing Claire against her seatbelt. Through the window, she saw flashes of light as explosions erupted around them. Then suddenly the ship stabilized, and they shot upward, leaving the planet behind. As they broke through the atmosphere, Claire slumped back in her seat, gasping for breath. "We made it," she whispered. Ryan gave her a weary smile. "Yeah, we did." But even as they floated in the vastness of space, neither of them could shake the feeling that their journey was far from over, and that the choices they had made would shape their lives in ways they couldn't yet imagine. The ship shuddered violently as it broke free from the planet's atmosphere, the engines roaring with effort. Claire clung to her seat, her knuckles white against the armrests. Her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. Through the small window, she watched as the alien world grew smaller and smaller, its jagged landscape fading into darkness. For a moment, relief washed over her. She had done it. She was off the planet, but the feeling didn't last long. "Something's wrong," Ryan muttered under his breath, his eyes glued to the control panel. The lights flickered, and the ship groaned ominously, as if protesting the strain. We're losing power. Claire's stomach dropped. What does that mean? It means we can't keep flying like this, Ryan snapped, his voice tight with frustration. He worked quickly, flipping switches and adjusting dials, but nothing seemed to help. The hum of the engine grew weaker, sputtering unevenly. The stabilizer is failing again. If I don't fix it soon, we'll lose altitude and... Claire's mind raced. They were still too close to the planet's gravitational pull to drift safely. If the ship gave out now, they would plummet back down or worse, get caught in the orbit and burn up. She wanted to ask what she could do to help, but Ryan's focused expression told her he was already doing everything he could. Hold on. Ryan shouted suddenly, jerking the controls to one side. The ship tilted sharply, throwing Claire sideways in her seat. She yelped in surprise, clutching the straps of her harness. Outside the window, streaks of fire illuminated the blackness of space as the ship scraped against the edges of the atmosphere. What's happening? Claire cried, her voice shaking. We're overheating. Ryan yelled back. The damage must have been worse than I thought. I'm trying to stabilize us, but it's not responding. Desperation clawed at Claire's chest. She glanced at Ryan, who was frantically working the controls, sweat dripping down his face. His hands moved with precision, but even she could see the panic in his eyes. This wasn't just bad luck, it was life or death. Then, without warning, the ship lurched violently again, sending both of them slamming into their seats. A loud bang echoed through the cabin, followed by an eerie silence. The engines had stopped. Completely. No, Ryan whispered, staring at the dashboard. No. Claire felt her breath catch. What happens now? Ryan didn't answer immediately. He leaned forward, pressing buttons and toggling switches, but the ship remained unresponsive. Finally, he slumped back in his chair, his face pale. We're dead in the water, he said quietly. The main engine is gone. We're floating, but we won't last long out here. Claire stared at him, her mind struggling to process his words. What about the emergency thrusters? Can't we use those? They're barely enough to keep us stable, Ryan replied, his voice hollow. Even if we manage to drift toward another system, it'll take days or weeks, and we don't have enough supplies for that. A heavy silence settled over the cabin. Claire looked out the window again, the vast emptiness of space stretching endlessly before her. For the first time since leaving the planet, she truly understood how fragile their situation was. Out here, there was no one to save them. No second. Chances died after a few moments, Ryan spoke again. There's only one option left. We need to send out a distress signal. Someone might pick it up if we're lucky. Claire nodded, though her heart sank. Luck hadn't exactly been on their side so far. Still, she didn't argue. Do it, she said softly. Ryan activated the communication system, broadcasting their location across multiple frequencies. The message repeated itself automatically, a robotic voice announcing their plight to the void. But as the minutes ticked by, no response came. The silence outside was deafening. Hours passed, and the tension inside the ship grew unbearable. Claire tried to distract herself by checking their limited supplies, food, water, oxygen, but every glance at the dwindling numbers made her anxiety worse. Ryan, meanwhile, stayed glued to the controls, scanning for any sign of activity nearby. Neither of them spoke much, the weight of their predicament hanging over them like a storm cloud dot by the time night fell, or rather, when the artificial lighting inside the ship dimmed to simulate nighttime. They were both exhausted. Claire curled up in her seat, staring blankly at the ceiling. Her thoughts drifted to Ryan, sitting just a few feet away. He had done everything he could to save her, to give her a chance at freedom. And now, because of her, he was trapped here. I'm sorry, she whispered suddenly, breaking the silence. Ryan turned to look at her, his brow furrowed. For what? For dragging you into this, Claire said, her voice trembling. If I hadn't begged you to take me with you, none of this would have happened. Ryan sighed heavily and shook his head. don't blame yourself. I chose to help you, remember? Besides, this isn't your fault. Space travel is dangerous. That's why most people avoid it. But you didn't have to risk your life for me, Claire insisted, tears welling up in her eyes. You barely know me. Ryan hesitated, then leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. Look, Claire, I've been alone for a long time, maybe too long. When I found you, it reminded me of what it feels like to care about someone else, too. Actually want to help. Yeah, things got messy, but I don't regret it. Claire blinked, surprised by his honesty. She opened her mouth to respond, but before she could say anything, the ship's sensors beeped loudly. Both of them froze, staring at the console. What is it? Claire asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ryan scanned the readings, his expression shifting from confusion to cautious hope. It's a ship, he said slowly, heading this way. Claire's heart leapt. Is it human? I don't know yet, Ryan admitted, his tone guarded. Could be aliens, could be scavengers. Either way, we need to prepare for anything. He quickly powered up the remaining systems, ensuring the ship's defenses were active. Then he grabbed a small handheld weapon from beneath his seat and handed it to Claire. Just in case, he said grimly. They waited in tense silence as the unknown vessel drew closer. Through the window, they spotted its silhouette, a sleek, metallic craft gliding smoothly through the darkness. It didn't look like any alien ship Claire had seen before, but she couldn't be sure. Finally, a transmission crackled through the speakers. Unidentified vessel. This is Captain Alden of the Solace. State your purpose. Ryan exchanged a glance with Claire, relief washing over his face. Human, he mouthed silently. He pressed the comms button. This is Ryan Carter, civilian trader. My ship is disabled, and we're running low on supplies. Requesting assistance. There was a pause, then the voice responded. Stand by. We're sending a boarding party to assess the situation. Minutes later, the airlock hissed open, and a team of humans entered the ship. They wore uniforms marked with the insignia of a distant colony, their faces stern but professional. One of them stepped forward, an older man with graying hair and sharp eyes. You're lucky we picked up your signal, the captain said, looking between Ryan and Claire. What happened? Ryan explained briefly, glossing over the details of their escape from the alien planet. The captain listened intently, nodding occasionally. When Ryan finished, the captain turned to his crew. Get them aboard the Solace. We'll tow their ship and figure out repairs once we're clear of this sector. Claire felt a wave of gratitude wash over her as she and Ryan were escorted onto the larger vessel. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to relax. Knowing they were safe for now, as they settled into temporary quarters aboard the Solace, Ryan turned to Claire. Well, he said with a faint smile, looks like our adventure isn't over yet. Claire nodded, returning his smile. No, it's not. But at least we're not alone anymore. For the first time in what felt like forever, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, they would make it through this together. Weeks passed aboard the Solace, and Claire slowly began to adjust to life among its crew. The ship was a bustling hive of activity, with people moving through narrow corridors and working in cramped quarters. It wasn't luxurious by any means, but after months of surviving on an alien planet, it felt like paradise. For the first time in what seemed like forever, Claire had regular meals, clean clothes, and a bed that didn't leave her back aching in the morning. Ryan, on the other hand, kept mostly to himself. He spent hours tinkering with the damaged ship they'd been towing behind the Solace, determined to salvage as much as possible. Captain Alden had offered to scrap it entirely, but Ryan refused. It's all I've got, he said simply when Claire asked why he cared so much. She understood. He had built his life around that ship, just as she had clung to hope during her time stranded alone. Still, despite their shared ordeal, something had shifted between them. The marriage they had hastily agreed to before leaving. The planet now felt awkward and distant, a relic of desperation rather than commitment. They rarely spoke about it, avoiding the topic whenever it came close to surfacing. Instead, they focused on survival and finding a way forward. One evening, as Claire sat in the mess hall, picking at a bowl of bland stew, Captain Alden approached her. He slid into the seat across from her, his expression thoughtful. "How are you holding up?" he asked. Claire shrugged, forcing a small smile. "I'm okay. Better than I was." The captain nodded, studying her for a moment. "You've been through a lot. Most people wouldn't have made it as far as you did." "I didn't do it alone," Claire replied softly, glancing toward the corner where Ryan sat, hunched over a datapad. "He helped me." Captain Alden followed her gaze and sighed. "That man doesn't trust easily. Whatever bond you two form down there, don't take it lightly." Claire frowned, unsure how to respond. "We're not exactly bonded anymore. Things have changed." "Maybe," the captain said, leaning back in his chair. "But sometimes change brings clarity. You'll figure it out." Before Claire could ask what he meant, the intercom crackled to life. "Attention, crew and passengers," a voice announced. "We'll be arriving at the colony station in 12 hours. Prepare for docking procedures." Claire's heart skipped a beat. A colony station, a real place where she could start over. She hadn't allowed herself to think too much about the future, focusing instead on getting through each day. But now, with the promise of safety on the horizon, questions began flooding her mind. What would happen to her once they arrived? Would she and Ryan go their separate ways? And what about their marriage? Later that night, Claire decided to confront him. She found him in the cargo bay, inspecting the towed ship under dim lighting. His face was smudged with grease, and his shoulders sagged with exhaustion. "Hey," she said quietly, stepping closer. Ryan glanced up, surprised to see her. "What's up?" "We need to talk," Claire said, her voice steady despite the nervous flutter in her chest. "About us." Ryan froze, then sighed heavily. "I figured this was coming." Claire crossed her arms, trying to organize her thoughts. "I don't know what we're doing anymore. We got married because I thought it would keep me safe. But now it feels like a mistake." "It was never supposed to be real," Ryan reminded her gently. "You know that." "I know," Claire admitted. "But it still happened. And now we're here alive because of choices we made. I don't want to just walk away and pretend none of it mattered." Ryan set down his tools and wiped his hands on a rag. "So, what do you want to do? Stay together? Go our separate ways? Start fresh somewhere else?" Claire hesitated, her mind racing. "I don't know. Maybe we should undo it legally. I mean, make it official that it's over." Ryan nodded. Slowly. "If that's what you want, I won't stop you. But let's wait until we reach the colony. We can sort everything out there." They stood in silence for a while, the weight of their decision hanging between them. Finally, Claire spoke. "Thank you for everything. Even if things didn't turn out the way I imagined, I couldn't have done it without you." Ryan gave her a faint smile. "Same goes for you. You kept me going when I wanted to give up." When they finally docked at the colony station the next morning, Claire felt a mix of excitement and dread. The station was massive, a sprawling network of metal structures connected by long tunnels. People bustled about, carrying supplies and chatting animatedly. It was a stark contrast to the isolation she had endured for so long. Captain Alden escorted them to the administration office, where they registered as refugees. Claire explained her story briefly, omitting most of the details about the crash and the aliens. When asked about her marital status, she hesitated, but ultimately confirmed that she was married to Ryan Carter. The administrator raised an eyebrow. "Married? Any plans to stay together?" Claire glanced at Ryan, who shrugged noncommittally. "Not sure yet," she replied honestly. "We're figuring things out." Once the paperwork was complete, they were assigned temporary housing within the colony. It was a small, Spartan apartment with 2 rooms, enough space for both of them to have some privacy. As they unpacked their meager belongings, Claire realized how little they actually owned. Everything they had was either salvaged or borrowed. The next few days, Claire threw herself into rebuilding her life. She volunteered at the colony's medical clinic, helping tend to minor injuries and illnesses. The work was simple but fulfilling, giving her a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. Meanwhile, Ryan focused on repairing his ship, spending long hours in the station's workshop. He rarely spoke about his progress, but Claire noticed the determination in his eyes whenever he returned covered in oil and sweat, despite their busy schedules. They occasionally crossed paths in the evenings, sharing quiet dinners in their apartment. These moments were awkward at first, filled with unspoken tension. But gradually, they began to relax, talking about their days and sharing stories of their pasts. Claire learned more about Ryan's travels, the places he had seen, the people he had met, and Ryan listened intently as Claire described her dreams of becoming an explorer. One night, as they sat side by side on the couch, Claire turned to him. "Do you ever regret staying behind? Helping me, I mean." Ryan shook his head. "No, not really. Like I said before, you reminded me of what it means to care about someone else. I needed that." Claire smiled faintly, her heart swelling with gratitude. "Me too." Though their marriage remained unresolved, the bond they had formed began to feel less like a burden and more like a foundation. They weren't lovers, nor were they strangers. They were partners, united by survival and mutual respect. As weeks turned into months, Claire started planning her next move. She applied for citizenship within the colony, knowing it would grant her stability and access to resources. When the approval came through, she celebrated quietly, feeling a sense of belonging she hadn't experienced since before the crash. Evening, as she and Ryan sat watching the stars through the station's observation deck, Claire broached the subject again. "What happens now?" she asked softly. "With us, I mean." Ryan thought for a moment, then shrugged. "Whatever you decide. If you want to stay here and build a new life, I won't hold you back. Same goes for me. I might leave once my ship is ready. But no matter what, I'll always be grateful for what we went through together." Claire nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "Me too." In that moment, she realized that their journey wasn't truly over. Whether they stayed together or parted ways, the connection they had forged would remain a testament to resilience, hope, and the power of human kindness. And for now, that was enough. Years had passed since Claire and Ryan parted ways at the colony station. Life had moved forward for both of them, though neither could forget the bond they had formed during their desperate escape from the alien planet. For Claire, the colony became her home, a place where she built a new life filled with purpose and routine. She worked tirelessly at the medical clinic, eventually earning a position as head nurse. Her days were busy, but she found joy in helping others, especially those who arrived at the station broken and lost like she once was. Still, there were quiet moments when memories of Ryan surfaced. She often wondered what had become of him after he left the colony. Had he repaired his ship? Was he still traveling across the stars, trading goods, and exploring distant worlds? Sometimes she imagined bumping into him again, perhaps on some far-off spaceport or remote outpost. But deep down, she knew that such encounters were unlikely. The galaxy was vast, and people rarely crossed paths twice. Despite this, Claire never gave up hope entirely. Over time, she began volunteering at the colony's spaceport, assisting with incoming ships and coordinating rescue missions for stranded travelers. It wasn't just about staying busy. It was her way of honoring the promise she made to herself, to help others the way Ryan had helped her. Every ship that docked brought a flicker of anticipation, a small part of her hoping it might be his. Then, one day, that hope turned into reality. It started like any other morning. Claire arrived at the spaceport early, checking manifests and organizing supplies for an upcoming supply run. The hum of activity filled the air as technicians worked on ships and pilots prepared for departure. As she reviewed the schedule, a name caught her eye, the Wanderer. It wasn't familiar, but something about it felt significant. A few hours later, the ship landed, its battered hull gleaming faintly under the docking lights. Claire watched curiously as the hatch opened, revealing a figure stepping out. At first, she didn't recognize him. His hair was streaked with gray, and his face bore new lines etched by time and hardship. But when he looked up and their eyes met, her breath caught in her throat. "Ryan," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the noise around them. He froze, staring at her for a long moment before breaking into a hesitant smile. "Claire," he said, his voice rough with disbelief. "Is that really you?" She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. Without thinking, she ran toward him, throwing her arms around him in a tight embrace. For a moment, everything else faded. Away the bustling spaceport, the curious glances from bystanders, even the years that had separated them. All that mattered was the fact that he was here, alive and safe. When they finally pulled apart, Ryan chuckled softly, shaking his head. "I can't believe this. Of all the places." "I've been waiting," Claire admitted, her voice trembling. "Not every day, but sometimes, hoping you come back." Ryan's expression softened, and he glanced around at the bustling station. "Looks like you've done well for yourself." "So have you?" Claire replied, gesturing to the ship behind him. "You fixed it." "Barely," Ryan joked, running a hand along the side of the Wanderer. "Took me longer than I thought. But yeah, she flies." They stood in silence for a while, the weight of their shared history hanging between them. Finally, Claire spoke. "Why did you come here? This isn't exactly a popular stop." Ryan hesitated, then shrugged. "Truthfully, I heard rumors about a colony nearby looking for volunteers to lead rescue missions. I figured maybe I owed it to someone to try." Claire blinked, surprised by his words. "You came because of me." "Partly," Ryan admitted, his tone quieter now. "But also because of what we went through together. It changed me, Claire. Made me realize how important it is to help people when they need it most." Tears streamed down Claire's face as she listened to him. "I thought I'd never see you again." "Me neither," Ryan said, his voice thick with emotion. "But here we are." Over the next few days, they spent hours catching up, sharing stories of their lives since they last saw each other. Claire told him about her work at the clinic, her efforts to rebuild her life, and the sense of fulfillment she found in helping others. Ryan recounted his adventures visiting uncharted planets, meeting strange species, and surviving countless close calls. Yet despite their different paths, they discovered that they still shared a deep connection rooted in trust and gratitude. One evening, as they sat together on the observation deck overlooking the stars, Claire broached the topic they had avoided until now. "What happens next?" she asked cautiously. "For us, I mean—" Ryan sighed, leaning back in his chair. "I don't know. I guess that depends on you." Claire frowned, unsure how to respond. "Do you think we could start over? Not as husband and wife, but as friends?" Ryan smiled faintly, reaching out to take her hand. "We already are friends, Claire. Always have been. And if you're willing, I'd like to stay to help with the rescue missions. Maybe even settle down for a while." Claire felt a wave of relief wash over her. "I'd like that too." In the weeks that followed, Ryan joined Claire at the colony, working alongside her to organize rescue operations and assist stranded travelers. Together, they became a team once again, united by a shared mission to make a difference. Though their relationship was no longer defined by marriage, it had evolved into something deeper, a partnership built on mutual respect, understanding, and love in its purest form. As they stood side by side one night, watching a newly rescued group disembark from a damaged ship, Claire turned to Ryan with a smile. "Thank you," she said simply. "For what?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "For coming back. For reminding me that second chances are possible." Ryan squeezed her hand gently, his gaze softening. "Let's go home," he said quietly. And with that, They walked away, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead together.